People who've seen someone get fired on the first day, why were they fired? Dishwasher left midway through his shift. This was a Sunday, so it was carvery and most of the chefs were outside serving, meaning no one noticed till about 6 p.m. when we bought everything in to be washed and there was stacks of plates. The waiters didn't bother telling us, so I as the kitchen assistant was there till midnight washing dishes. I started at 10 a.m. When he came in for his next shift, he was fired, and his only excuse was he didn't know when his shift was meant to end. His schedule literally said 4 p.m. till close, which for a pot washer on Sunday would normally be about 7 p.m. if they keep up throughout the day. I.e., I can finally contribute to one of these threads. So, this morning at work, supermarket, I was given a new guy in my department and got told to train him. Cool, I can pretend to know how to do my job well enough for this. Showed him around, got him to serve a customer, and then he was like, "Hey, is it alright if I use the bathroom?" 15 minutes passed. 20 minutes passed. I got on my headset and was like, "Hey, has anyone seen the new guy? He said he went to the toilet 20 minutes ago, I haven't seen him since," and a few people were like, "Sure, we'll keep an eye out for him. Maybe he got lost." I did show him where the toilets etc. was, and he did exclaim how big the back of the store was. 45 minutes later, they found him just sitting in the men's locker room on his phone. Around 11 a.m., the store manager was like, "I need to speak to, new person, please," and they went away to the office. It's almost 2 p.m., and I haven't seen him since. I've seen my store manager but haven't asked her or anything, so I have jumped to a very big conclusion. But finally I get to share a story. I got fired on day 30. My first job as a legal assistant. I was young and not very intelligent. But it was 1 month into the job and the lawyer was expecting a call from a judge, but she was busy doing something, and when he called I told him she was on the phone and he said he will call in a few minutes back. Once she got off the phone I told her and she said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And she was on the phone. I told her he will call back. After he called back and they spoke, she came and said, "I want you to leave now." It traumatized me, but now being 31, I think how wrong it was for her to do it. Starting a yelling match with the IT guy who gave the acceptable network use presentation because a site he uses, for the military, wasn't accessible at our workstations. Later found out dude had never been in the military. First day orientation at a big retailer. Dude well into his 40s, kept going on and on about how he can't work Saturdays. The trainer kept saying, "That's fine, we will deal with that later." During our tour of the store, he would bug any supervisor or manager and tell them he can't work Saturdays. It was like super compulsive and he wouldn't stop. When we got to lunch, I heard him calling his dad on the phone, "Hey Dad. It's going good. I got 100% on my test," the test being, "Is stealing bad? Yes or no?" type of boring videos, with a 4-question follow-up quiz afterwards. Towards the end of the day, they pulled him out of our group in the hallway outside, and he was given a paycheck for the couple hours he worked and told to not come back. He tried to speak up, but he ended up having to call his dad and ask him to pick him up early. Felt bad for the dude. I saw someone get fired before their first day. She had been in for an interview at a restaurant I worked at, and got the job. Later that same evening, she came in for dinner. She stiffed the server, and was overall extremely rude. The manager contacted her and said he had changed his mind. I scored a job at an automotive accessories manufacturer's, bull bars, side steps, that sort of thing. Was given a SOP, standard operating procedure. Instructions that anyone can follow, for a nudge bar, and shown the pile of parts to make the nudge bars. "Show me what you can do," said the foreman. "I'll be back in an hour," and if he goes. By the time he got back I'd finished tack welding all the bars together. "How did get them done so quick?" he asked. I explained to him that the 𝘚𝘦𝘰'𝘗𝘦 idiot who wrote the SOP had no idea what they were doing. Needless to say, I don't work there anymore. The foreman was the 𝘚𝘦𝘰'𝘗𝑦 idiot. About 3 years ago, I was working at a shop in a Chevrolet dealership. Kid who was about 22 got hired with all of his supposed knowledge from automotive school. First day he had to ask another tech every step to taking off the calipers to change some brake pads and rotors, used an air impact on an oil pan, then dropped a brand new Corvette off his lift. He came back the next morning to get his tools. Lady at McDonald's stole $60 from the cash register. They caught it on camera, called the cops, before telling her she was fired. What happened to her, except she didn't make it to the end of her shift. While working in Amazon as a coordinator, there's a lot of new employees hired onto warehouse. So new employees have the turn to see the stations and pick tower etc., but there's that guy that acts suspicious and the security ask him to identify himself. It goes back and forward but they recognized him, so next thing I see is security taking him to the room. They are interrogating, searching and do tests there. So it turns out that guy was previously fired for being under the influence of drugs, alcohol, but this time they find USB drive in his posterior. Caught guy made a lot of fuss and get escorted on day one. Again. Technically not her first day, but her first day of showing up. When I was a trainer at a licensed Starbucks, one of my potential trainees didn't respond to any calls or texts leading up to her first week of training shifts. A month later, she walks in and asks what she's supposed to do. I tell her she's been taken off the schedule and she is no longer a part of the company after the lack of communication. She said she was asked to come in, so I take her back to the training room and show her how to watch the videos. Once she's settled, I make a beeline to the store manager's office, while simultaneously calling the department manager. The three of us are talking for at least 20 minutes trying to figure it out, and the store manager wants me to go tell her that she's not going to be working here if we're so adamant about not taking her on. Apparently he was the one who called her in even though he had signed the form allowing my supervisor to fire this girl. Meanwhile my supervisor and I are adamant that it's not our jobs. And she hasn't even started, so what's the harm in letting her go? Eventually, I pull the short straw and have to go explain to her that she had been fired after the 2 weeks of no call, no showing and no communication whatsoever. She asked to speak to the manager, LOL, so the coward had to do it anyway. Worked at a hardware store in college. Guy showed up plastered and ended up knocking a bunch of our most expensive Benjamin Moore paint off the shelf and all over the aisle. Probably lost about $600 worth of product. Pizza delivery, guy wrecked his car provided by the shop on his first delivery. He didn't even make it off the curb but crashed right into a brand new Mercedes while trying to merge into traffic. Dude left the job losing money. Not me but my dad. He's a pharmacist so he works for stores such as Walgreens and in hospitals. One lady called a customer stupid because they didn't pronounce a medication correctly. If you have seen almost any prescription medicine you know what the words are like. Learned how to pronounce and read chemicals and medicines from my dad. Not all people have that as well as possible speech conditions. Totally uncalled for and a POS thing to do. My first job was for Wendy's as the opening grill guy. A new employee was starting, so I was asked to work an evening shift to train. Within an hour of the start of their shift, they gave away over $100 of free food to their friends. I wasn't 100% sure so I didn't accuse, but I mentioned what I saw to the boss the next morning and 2 people ended up getting fired for it, including the new hire and I guess someone who either helped or also was caught on the same video doing whatever. I am a trucker and we heavy haul sand from processing plants out into the backwoods frac sites, where they do natural gas well drilling. Lots of steep hills, off-road driving, not your casual highway/loading dock stuff. I was training a new guy who swore up and down he had many years of driving anything I can think of in the trucking industry. I explained to him that we always use the engine brake or you'll just cook your brake shoes off and crash badly. Despite this being an interview and a driving test, he still tries to turn them off while we're driving and loaded. I flip them back on and reiterate that they stay on. 5 minutes later a deer runs out of the woods, and I have to grab the steering wheel at 60 miles per hour to prevent him from trying to swerve around the deer. That would have rolled the truck. Then would I get out to survey the damage from Bambi? The bumper is pushed into the right front tire. Before I can even say that we'll have to chain to the guardrail and yank it back out, he's saying, oh, that will be fine. He wanted to continue on like that, which would have shredded our steer tire. At this point I'm already sure I'm failing him, but with the nature of this work, we're stuck together for the whole trip to deliver the load and return back to base where we both clock out. The delivery goes okay, and we're in a short line, maybe 3 to 4 trucks leaving the site in a mini convoy. Dirt roads are very narrow, so there's frequent times we pull over as far as possible to allow loaded trucks to pass us going back up the hill. After a stop of less than 2 minutes, while I'm sitting in the passenger seat, he suddenly starts cranking the wheel to the right as if to make a 90-degree turn. Problem is, there is no turn. To our left is the side of a giant hill, to our right is a 150-foot drop-off. I shout whoa whoa WHOA, and suddenly this guy snaps to saying I got it, I got it. I realized in that split second the driver fell asleep and nearly killed us both. I badly wanted to just leave him there in the middle of nowhere, but the last bit of kindness in me allowed him to switch seats and I drove the semi back to base 4 hours away. He just went to sleep for the entire return trip. Of course I failed him and notified HR that he wouldn't cut it here. He had my cell hashtag as I was his trainer and attempted to blow up my phone for 2 days straight, leaving voicemails of how bad do you feel making someone lose their job right before Christmas. I was 18 and working part-time at a small call center while I went to school. A new guy, who had been hired a few days before, but had just started that evening, came into the call center room with the manager, who was explaining things to him. When she paused, new guy said, "Okay, I can't start today, I can start in 4 days." Manager said, "You didn't mention that in your interview, are you sick?" New guy responded, "No, my astrology chart said that today would be a bad day to start, but Friday would be good." He was immediately escorted out. Substitute teacher shows up for training high. Escorted off premises within about 5 to 10 minutes. The funny thing was he'd been fired before, for a different issue. Never rehire someone you fired before. Years ago, maybe in 2008 or so, I worked at a company that would run background checks on its new hires. There was one guy who they let start before the results came back. It turns out he lied about his education and, I think, he also had a criminal record. He said that there was a mix-up, and that he would run down to the police station to get it all sorted out. To my knowledge, he still has not returned from lunch. Worked at a scuba shop. On first day, a guy took a spear gun and decided to show a customer how it works. In the shop. By test firing it at wall. That had our dry suits on display. And if that wasn't bad enough, it nearly went all the way though the shit-thin wall and stopped about 6 inches in front of our travel director's forehead. The boss handed him a $100 bill and said, "Let's just pretend you declined our job offer." Former Domino's delivery driver. Guy shows up, we get him trained on a couple of things, and things were good for like 3 hours before he asks if he can take a smoke break. 2 hours later, never came back in, but we could see him in his car. Turns out the dude wanted to smoke something other than nicotine, and he passed out in his car. Manager clocked him out, waited for the dude to come back in, and fired him on the spot. Technically not fired, but it was a job that required no interview. All you had to do was attend a 4-hour training and you were in. One guy showed up late without calling in advance. He was told to leave the second he arrived. Worked at an aerospace company building satellites. Got assigned a new technician to train, older guy. Sat down at the computer to show him the automated programs we use to run tests on a satellite. The work instructions were in a folder on the desktop. I told him to open the folder. He said, "How do I do that?" He somehow got hired to build satellites, but didn't know how to use a computer. Honestly, the recruiter's fault too. I used to work for an events agency that sent folks all over the city to set up everything from sports games and concerts to weddings and brand promotion stuff. A lot of carrying heavy things around or doing the basic setup of audio/visual equipment, chairs, tables, everything. One job everyone dreaded was setting up the mobile viewing stand for sports games. Huge heavy fucking thing, all put together by hand. One guy showed up visually drunk, was clearly being sloppy. We were in a chain passing heavy as fuck floor pieces down from the stand as we were tearing it down after an event. This dude didn't even look to see if I had it and dropped it on my head. He didn't even react. Everyone around stopped to see if I was okay, and it took him a good few seconds to realize anything was wrong. Still no reaction. The supervisor comes over, asks what happened, tells the guy to be more careful and walks off. 10 minutes later he does it again, this time when no one was there, and it bounces down to the floor, missing everyone luckily. Supervisor comes over and shouts at all of us to be more careful. Drunk guy continues to not give a shit. Anyway, some kid asked politely if the supervisor wouldn't shout at them all the time when they weren't doing anything wrong, and was fired on the spot. Nice job. I work for an international company in Germany. We sell machines for building technology. A new colleague in the field sales department gets his company car and drives through 2 speed checks on the way to his first customer. He then spent 3 hours on the phone with his lawyer. On the way back, he again drives too fast through a speed check. When he realizes that he has driven the wrong way, he turns round and drives through the same checkpoint again. The next day he had to get his papers. So I was working for an IT company, and one of our clients was notorious for not being able to keep their staff. They would treat them really poorly, and just fired PPL they didn't like. It got to a point where the employees would gamble on how long the new guy would hold up. They even had a dedicated calendar to mark their guesses on when said new guys will get fired. Anyway, this company wanted to hire a new production supervisor, and the guy who got that job was really cocky at the beginning, apparently. He said he needed a company car, it has to be an SUV, and he also needs a credit card from the company so he can pay for gas. On a side note, asking for this is not too unusual where I live. Asking specifically for an SUV is kinda strange, but not rude. He started working there, and a few hours and I got an email from the owner asking me to delete his user account. After asking him what happened, he listed a few things that he felt like was enough to fire the poor guy. He said the guy was too late and was using his PC for private stuff. Later, I found out that he was actually 15 minutes early and just wanted to smoke a cig before the shift. The private thing that he was doing at his PC was Googling how MS Excel works, BTW. So yeah, he set a new high score of 6H before getting fired, and all the other employees lost their bets. BC, they thought he would hold up at least a few days. Guy gets hired to work the register at my Walgreens, because his ex works next door at the Arby's. They always come over for smokes and snacks around lunch. I had a deal worked out with the Arby's crew, they give me food, I make sure they get their smokes and snacks. It was mostly just a way around annoyances and inconveniences, no actual theft, but we were friends. Arby's girl comes and tells me the new guy is super racist and harassing her. Apparently he was mad she was now dating a black guy. I thought you were better than that, you whore, and ******** lover, hard R and all. So I go and ask the guy if he knows her, just checking because you know, people lie. He freely admits everything and again starts insulting them both and saying how disappointed he was that she's dirty now. That night I had a really long awkward talk with HR where I had to repeat everything he told me and then put an all in writing for them. He was technically fired the next day, but only because they wanted to do it in person. One time, I literally had to get rid of a new employee that worked in the food service industry. I caught this girl eating raw fucking bacon at the food prep area. After explaining to her she shouldn't eat raw bacon, let alone in the food prep areas. She told me I was wrong. Then, less than 10 minutes later, I caught the same woman chewing on her fingernails at the main food prep area. Seen this woman again a few weeks ago. She had come in with a receipt with someone else's info on it for an order we had delivered 5 days previously. On this order, I asked what the problem was. She told me she had just gotten around to eating this food item, after 5 fucking days. I refused to give them store credit or refund the item, as it was clear to me she was lying. So, I got to tell this woman on 2 separate occasions that something wasn't edible, or was risky to make someone sick as fuck. ID went first thing the next morning to talk to the boss lady about this employee. I explained that this lady was a liability. She was actively trying to put herself in a situation where herself or someone else would get injured or sick. I take fucking with people's food seriously. I work construction 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Guy used to be a subs labor for us, we hired him over the weekend. Monday rolls around and the guy doesn't show up until 9:45. The first thing he does is ask boss man for a pair of gloves, company provides them, and then comes to help me install some wiring. The entire time I'm running the wire by myself, he is cutting the fingertips off of his gloves. Now I don't really pay attention to it much, because that's a normal thing to do so that you can feel the nuts and bolts, etc. you are trying to twist on. However, when I finally look back at him, he has trashed the entire hand part of each glove, and taped only the fingertip part to his fingers. I have no fucking clue what the thought process was like, but I just ignored it. Anyway, that's not what got him fired, just enjoyed that part of his short-lived story. So anyway, we go to lunch at 12, and we come back half an hour later and the general contractor is walking around looking annoyed. He sees me, and asks me if I know who this guy is, as he shows me a picture on his phone of the new hire drinking a beer at the restaurant right across the street. So yeah, he was fired for drinking on the job, while having worked for approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes. Funniest shit ever. I'ma be honest. I'm not a good worker. I feel bored at my job and I draw sometimes, because there is nothing to do. Sometimes I'm on my phone, learning some new skills. Or reading articles, or texting others. Then these sniffy coworkers don't mind their own business, and tell me to not do these things. Even the boss tells me that this behavior is unwished. The irony, they have a CCTV room and observe my workplace. But they themselves are just doing the same thing. I just don't want to go to this room, because I'm rather alone. I'm also arriving late quite frequently, because I just don't see the point in arriving early if there is nothing to do in the first place. I'd just be sitting there and do nothing. Makes no sense to me. But then they warn me to kick me out if I repeat it. Time goes by, I either am punctual or have been sneaky. And if they notice it again, they just warn me again. And if I want to take a break, I have to ask in a very specific way, may I please take a break? Like they are just sitting in this room having the same shift as I have and I'm the only one actually working, and they tell me to change my line from I'll have a break to OHHH yes I beg you please my lord. Nah fuck that, I'm just sneaky, and eat something real quick. If you made it into the inner circle of the heads at my work, you can just sit there and chill and make money. If you don't get along with them, you have to work and get commanded around. I sound like an asshole. I'm an asshole for that I guess, because I'm breaking rules and disobey them. I'm just a student and this is a mini job. Worked in a knick-knack shop a few years back. Saw a guy with big ambitions, like I'll be the boss one day and do nothing at all ambitions, watch how a painting canvas was falling over. In order to stop the featherweight canvas from falling, he let go of the aluminum ladder he was holding. He saved the canvas for the small price of the ladder hitting a customer in the head. I watched a guy get fired before his first day. Came for an interview, and calling him dumb as a rock is an insult to rocks. Anyways, he was hired regardless, because you only need a brain cell and a hand to wash car windows. His first day was going to be the day following. He hung around for an hour asking dumb questions as me and another guy were working on the drum brakes of a van. Then he walked outside the bay and in full view of the neighboring road, pissed on the side of the building. The supervisor was outside smoking a Newport and walked around the corner to see that. He was told not to come in tomorrow, lol. I started a new job at a warehouse last week. Shifts are 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., which for most people means waking up around 4:30 a.m. A guy that started with me fell asleep stood up when being shown the role. He fell into the trainer, which tripped him up. Trainer obviously wasn't happy. A bit later on we get trained on the headsets, which basically tell you what location and what item to pick. The sleepy guy dropped the equipment and it stopped working. They cost about £3,000 each according to the trainer. He finally gets a headset that's working and you have to repeat words back to the headset so it gets used to your voice. Typically takes around 20 minutes. This guy spent the rest of the shift saying back the phrases to the headset. 6+ hours. The next day, day 2, the sleepy guy isn't there. I said to the trainer, did he get sacked? He said yeah, I had to. Falling asleep on the first day isn't good. He wasn't right for the position. Warehouses are notorious for sacking people, usually for no reason, a lot of agency contracts, etc., but this guy defiantly deserved sacking. He smoked in our closed workshop next to flammable liquids, and threw the buds next to containers that were filled with oil and cleaning products. Boss told him once to never do that again. About 2 hours later he did it again, got caught and kicked out.